Anybody got any questions before I ask one? Okay, mine's a very easy one, Stefan only. How do you get hold of that structure chart? Is it easy to find on the web? The structure, wonderful structure chart. I've never ever seen it before.
You mean for the indicator from H2020?
No, all those people at the European Commission.
If you go to DG Research webpage,
Uh-huh.
you go all the way down to the bottom on the right, you'll see the organogram, as they call it.
No.
And that's where everything is. And they update it quite often, so you have the right
You wouldn't
names
like to put a reference at the bottom of your slide before you send it.
I can do that, no problem.
Okay, question there. Say who you are, please, and I'll give you the microphone.
Hi, Damien Pattinson from PLOS. Kevin, you said at the beginning of your talk, and I felt the same, that it's quite disappointing that the EU seemed to be focusing entirely on, mainly on general impact factors and also, but even just on citations. It feels there's a very big gulf between what the EU are doing and what Wellcome Trust are doing, for example. Do you feel that is that your perception as well? Do you think the EU are sort of further behind in that discussion and aren't looking at the full range of impacts of research?
I think you're correct, but I think at the same time that's the visible part, the one they're putting out there. Keep in mind that they're not just a funder, they're a policymaker, so they have to be super careful at what they put forward. For example, one other big campaign I have with them is to promote ORCID. And even though they love the concept and see the potential and agree, they're not going to be happy to do that because they can be seen as promoting one versus the other, to which I say, which other? And yes, there are other ones out there, but it's just that's where it is. So they have to be highly careful when they publish something like H2020 indicator. They'll be super conservative. There are people like Rosalind van Vlies in her team or in Jean-Claude Burgelman's team who are, looking at the future. But all that is just slow. I think that the Open Science Stakeholder Forum is going to be quite influential in that sense, so that's going to be good. And you will see progress for Horizon 2020.
Any comments, either of you?
Yes, I don't want to pick out the European Commission because they're certainly not alone in using general impact factors, and although the Wellcome Trust very much states that it's the quality of the research, not the journal it appears in, which interests us. To be honest, we put things out for peer review, and it's the research community who really decide on the value of things. So whatever we do, I think we have to take the research community with us. But I was very interested to hear about this working group to find the societal economic indicators, and we'll certainly be talking to them and trying to make sure we're involved in that.
It is an open call. It will be an open call, calling for experts to be part of that group, and that should be coming out in December, early December.
Thank you.
Could I interject a question?
Okay.
I simply wanted to say, listening to what I just heard, is there any collaborative mechanism and discussion between funders on improving the standardized use of article level metrics? Is it something you talk about, or do you only come to conferences and talk about it?
Kevin, go on, your turn.
There are a number of forums in which these discussions are made. I think the problem, which is that we all have different masters. We all have different people to serve. The government funders are looking for different things. To the contributory charity funders, who have to do things which make people put coins in collection tins, whilst we have this independence that somebody else said. So there are things we can do and the different drivers, and we certainly talk to each other. We are making more of an effort to talk to Europe, actually, to try. We're very engaged with the British government and public funders, but it's the Wellcome, we are stepping out more on the world stage.
And keep in mind, please keep in mind also that you've got a very fragmented landscape in Europe. So UK is certainly well ahead. You've got a good view what's happening at the EU level with the Commission, and they are actually speak to many of the funders. But you've got other countries that are just, it's just astonishing when I go there and I hear what the councils over there are using as metrics to evaluate their researchers. It's just, flabbergasting. It's just incredible. And so you've got this whole range. And I think that's where the influence of the UK funders is quite important also, to bring those ideas in those forms. A good place would be Science Europe, which is a club of funders, the Association of Funders. I know you were part of observers in the ESF where I was, but I don't know if you're in the Science Europe one, but that's this place.
Science Europe is public funders over, but only, so we're not official members, but again, we're observers. Yeah.
Yes, please.
Matt Mackay from STM. A question for Kevin. Kevin, you gave some examples of where research had been tweeted, shared, picked up by the news, and you indicated that you felt that that was sort of a greater impact for that research. When I'm not working for STM, I spend a lot of my time lecturing about PR and virality of communications. And when I'm teaching my class, I try to get them away from the raw numbers, which I believe are effectively an output, how many people have clicked retweet, how many people have shared it, to actually start to look at outcome, which I believe is a better measure of actual impact, what has been achieved. I just find it quite hard when you're looking at how many people have tweeted it, whether they're an important stakeholder or not, to argue that that is a measure of outcome, i.e. impact, rather than simply a number, a metric, which is an output.
Oh, I very much agree. As I said, it's showing, I think, an indicator of potential for impact.
Is it just showing reach, though?
Yes, absolutely. It's reach engagement. I think as more things develop around the altmetric world, there will be better ways. There are linking to clinical guidelines and to patents and to looking there, obviously, a more thorough way. But I think even if it is just attention, it has some interest, maybe not value. We're not going to start making awards on the basis of numbers of tweets, but we don't do that on the number of citations either. So it's
one more question down there.
It's another question for Kevin. Joe McEntee from IOP Publishing. So just a question for you, Kevin. You talked about case studies, lay summaries, additional content that opens up research to a lay audience and maybe to other disciplines. How important is that when it comes to individual grant applications?
It's we value it's the open data and those kind of things particularly are it's a vastly developing area, and we certainly encourage the openness of data. And if you when in our application forms, it varies from scheme to scheme, but certainly some of them will, rather than just having list all your publications, all those in the top journals, it talks which are your 5 top publications or 5 research outputs, what was your role in them and why were they important, and so you can point to particular data sets being perhaps reused by others and particularly used there. The infrastructure for this data linking and data citation is developing. It's not as firm as a publication citation yet, but things will improve. But certainly we want to give the freedom for people to point these things out and where they're important. And evidence towards that is obviously good, but the existence of it is there. So it's important, but as I said earlier in response to Damien's question, when things go out to the community for peer review, it's kind of up to them to decide what is valuable. We don't impose strict rules on that.
I think we'll have to stop now. Thank you.